I can see you, but I cannot hear you. Still no volume.
Hello, hello, hello.
I get you now. See you, but I cannot hear you.
Okay, folks. Again, so I've been talking for a few minutes, and you were not able to hear me. Is all. I'm running behind today, so I'm running a
Mhm.
little bit behind. So, McMack, how you been doing? While you kind of bring up everybody up to speed, let me get a couple of invites out here so I can get this thing cracking.
I am doing good sitting here watching some TV, really, really enjoying. At least here in Memphis, it's been cold. So enjoying the nice cold weather and just locking down, staying in, and just relaxing.
Okay, okay,
Watching into this Rams and Seahawks game.
gotcha. Okay, so do me a favor, McMack. Post the. I'll do that real quick myself. I'm going to put the link up there for anybody, and I'll kind of continue to send out some individual links for
Hmm.
you guys. But to get us started, Tasha, what do you think about what we're going to be talking about tonight? You introduced the topic for me.
I cannot wait. It is about the difference in the generations and how we all look in relationships and how we've changed and grown from the baby boomers all the way up until Gen Z. And I cannot wait for us to delve off into this topic because we know that there's differences. It's very obvious. We pull from different generations. Some things are going, some things are coming back in style, other things are not. It's kind of one of those things like they went away and they've never been able to really come back. So,
Absolutely, absolutely. And people always wonder a lot of times, well, how do we come up with these topics? Of course, we were kicking around this topic, you and I, the other day, and we thought
mhm,
it'd be fun, audience, just so you know, we thought it'd be fun to kind of talk about how different relationships, relate to each other when it comes to relationships, because we always talk about those age gaps. Now, it's not going to be
mhm,
a serious conversation tonight, so we're going to keep it real lighthearted and things of that nature. But I thought it would be just kind of cool to kind of explore, how different age groups factor in terms of how you grow up, what you've been exposed to, and how those things actually affect how you deal with people. How you
mhm.
doing tonight, Candace?
Hey, I'm doing well. Hi, Tasha.
Hey, Candace.
Sweetheart. So I apologize again to the audience for running a little behind. Kind of time crept up on me. We're going to be talking about love across the generations, and we're going to explore all of the different generations from the baby boomers to Generation Z, the Millennials to Generation X. My audience, ironically, falls. I have members in all those different generations. I
Mhm,
thought it would be cool as we talk about what has defined us, because we all come from different walks of life, our backgrounds are different. What makes us up in that in terms of then how we relate to each other, in terms of how we deal with each other just in general. And so I'm going to give a couple people just a couple more minutes to see if I can get a couple more members in there, but we'll kind of go through. But as we get into this, so I can define the generations. That way, as we come on, what I'm going to be doing tonight, anybody that speaks, I want to ask them, I want to kind of identify what generation they're in, because then that will kind of tell us a little bit of why they think the way they think. So, what I'm going to do for the ladies,
mhm.
I won't have you say your age. I know that that can be one of those questions where people don't want to say their age, but I'm going to give the age groups of the generations, and then you can kind of say as you come on what whether which group you fall in. So just so you know, the baby boomers, when we talk about baby boomers, we're talking about people, in that age group from 1946 to 1964. Now, you might be saying, do I even have any people showing who watch my show in that generation? I do.
Mhm.
Believe it or not, I do. I recently found out that I have family members, believe it or not, older brothers and sisters that are watching this. I have an aunt that tunes in on a regular basis that falls within this group. And so I was very pleasantly surprised to hear some comments from, family members that, hey, I watched the show, I thought this or I thought that. And so they fall into that specific category. Okay, from there you go to the Generation X. Now those are the people that was born between 1965 and 19. It says 81, I believe. That's me. So I'm considered a Generation X. You guys have been watching me for a while. You know that I'm scared to share my age. By the grace of God, just this week on Tuesday, January the 5th, I made 53 years old. So, so I'm still in celebratory mode a little bit. So
Woo!
I'm that generation. Absolutely. So that's where I fall. Then, of course, we go down to the millennials. These are the individuals born from 1980 to 2000. So I started thinking about my audience when I started thinking about that age group, and we'll see, how who identifies in that age group. And then from there, of course, you have Generation Z. Those are those individuals born from 1995 to current you know. So I had to think about that. Do I have any active viewers? And I don't have any people come on camera, but I do have some Generation Zs that watch my video, especially after the fact. So with that said, just real quickly, Candace, which generation do you fall in?
I'm a millennial.
Okay. Tasha?
I'm also a millennial. I'm 32. I don't mind sharing my age. I'm
Yeah.
32.
Okay.
I
And
consider myself more of the elder millennial. So
yeah,
it
Okay.
makes a
I'm
difference.
I'm the super elder because I'm 37.
Okay.
So
Okay. 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 So for you guys, age really didn't be a factor in there. So okay, we're gonna go ahead on and get started then. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna describe each group a little bit more in detail by some of the characteristics that define that generation. Then we'll just kind of talk about, you know, what we've noticed. Tasha, I know you've kind of looked up some information. So
Mhm.
we'll kind of talk about how that generation related to each other, especially when it comes to relationships. So those baby boomers, let's start there. So for my sisters and aunties watching, I'm talking to you guys. So when we think about the baby boomers, I'm going to post it on across my screen. These were also known as the flower generation. Now, you ladies might be too young to really know about this, but I'm sure you've researched this before. But you've heard about the flower power age, things of that nature, right? Because these are people that fall within that age group right now from all the way up to these like 51 to 70, you know. And in doing research, when they talked about this generation, it actually called them the most influential generation of all. And I thought that was very interesting. How you doing, Daracel?
Hey, what's up, guys?
Welcome, sweetheart. So as you jumping into the conversation, we're jumping it off. We're talking about baby boomers. Those individuals born, in that flower power generation from 1946 to 64. And so these were the people that experienced the civil rights era. When I was doing my research, I started thinking about all the things that define this era, from civil rights to Woodstock to Vietnam War. And so if you've got parents in that age group or older relatives in that age group, I want you to start thinking about how they relate to each other, people from that time. Now, I'm come from a family of 11 children. So this was really interesting to me because I got to thinking about my brothers and sisters who are much older than I am. And of course, my mom and the things that they saw, the things that they went through. So when you think about those people who experience, Woodstock, civil rights movement, and it hit my family particularly personally because one of their members, that was killed in Mississippi, the four boys that was killed. I mean, the three slain people. J.E. Cheney is a cousin of mine. In fact, that's how my family ended up, up north. There's a direct result of that. But in that generation, these were workaholics. They talked about how this generation, they were known for being homeowners, saving their money, homeowners. They came from the old family dynamic where the husband went out and worked, made a living, and the wife stayed home, had
Mhm.
children. Back then, relationships were defined by building a family. You know, and you think about that generation, how they were taught that you get grown, you get married, you start a family, you get your own home, you save money, you work, your values, all those things. So when you think about that, I'll throw the question out there to anybody, whether you got older brothers, sisters, uncles, parents, or whatever. What do you think about that generation and all that they went through and how they deal with each other, especially when it comes to relating to one another?
Okay,
Anybody?
I'll go
I,
first.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. For me, it's very interesting. My stepmom is falls into the baby boomer age gap. So how she was raised, very traditional, those traditional gender roles. Now she's on the cusp of it to Gen X. So she did go to college. She did not initially just set out to just start a
Okay.
family, but that was taught because that's what her family taught her. But she did end up getting married and starting her own family after she got her education and after she bought her first home. So it's I it's one of those, like you said, it is very influential, and I it's what's sad is a lot of the roles, a lot of the traits from that time era is really like looked down on now as being so traditional, and we've lost a lot of
Mhm.
that. And I think in some
Yeah.
instances we really got to work on bringing some of that back because of how far we've swung to the other side.
I
So
love it. I love it. Great start. And you touched on some of the things that for me, I'm going to touch on as well. Do you think in this generation, do you think we've lost a lot by not having some of those traditional values? I'll let anybody answer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
Definitely.
Okay. Okay. Well, and so do you guys have, Daracel or Candace, you got any family members? What's been your experience with people from that generation?
The boomers, as we say, the millennials
Boomers.
call them boomers.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot. My mom is on like I guess the first year of Generation X, even though sometimes she's considered a boomer as well. I feel like they were a large generation and they did shape how we were, especially in the Black community, because you get some of them wanting to now spoil their children. They are some affluent Black people, and
Yep.
so in that time, and so if you look at what they created, us millennials, we are very entitled. And so it was all to kind of
I'm not entitled.
I am very
Oh my
entitled.
God. Oh my God. Yes, we are entitled, including myself, but we're gonna talk
yes.
about that. We're
Everything,
gonna
yeah.
talk about that.
So
We're gonna
I,
talk
I
about
feel
that.
like they were trying to definitely change the way some things were in order to make a better life for their children. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Darcel, I'll let you chime in.
Well, you guys will have to enlighten me a little bit. What age group are the boomers now?
These 1946 to 1964. So these people would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 51-ish to like 70-ish. So these is just that
Okay.
older generation.
I guess my mother, whose name we shall not speak of, but she would fall into that age group.
Okay.
But the relationships that I've seen, she's always had like a weird kind of relationships. I never saw her kiss anybody. I never saw her, hug anybody. So she lives in she was growing up back then where it was a party lifestyle and the party resulted in kids, but there was never like relationship. So she was kind of the wild child. She
Okay.
lived in that
Okay.
that time frame. She never had really a traditional, relationship.
I'm glad you brought that up. You might have missed the very beginning part because
Oh.
that same generation, Daracel, they was in Woodstock. They called them the flower children. So you too
Mhm.
young to know this, but I'm 53. I came along right enough to, and I had brothers and sisters that talked about this. You've heard of that free love generation? That's
Yep.
that they experienced that. And
Mhm.
so imagine going from you talked about a couple of good points. You said your mom, you never saw her kiss anybody,
Mhm.
anything like that. But of course, there's children.
Mhm.
I think about my own situation. Family of 11. My mom is not very big on emotions. So we didn't grow up
Mhm.
getting a lot of hugs and kisses. We knew we were loved, because that generation kept things so private, you
Right.
know. But clearly there was a lot of fucking going on, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? You know, because that was the generation where they had big families though. when you look at today's society, if you have 3 kids, that's a big family. But back in that generation, it was normal to 6 and up. That was normal. You know that again, it almost was like it was your role to have a family. But of course, the things that impacted that is back then for that generation, the woman wasn't working. She was not in the workplace.
Mhm.
So she was the homemaker. That was her role. But they also didn't show a lot of emotion, and so it's amazing how to see that generation and how they probably look at us today, like the wild kids, the freakniks, and all the things that they've seen. But it's funny because my mom tells these stories. My mom is 83 years old. And growing up, my mom used to say to us, "You ain't doing nothing. What you done picked up, I done put down." You know, she had even these little songs she used to sing about put her foot on the rock and let the boys get the cock. Sorry, mom, I gotta tell it.
Yes.
But
But she was part of the silent generation, right? The one before.
abso-
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
So that passing down, and even
I
to my
like
older,
mama.
right, to my older brothers and sisters, what they've seen, but they were taught in terms of how they relate to each other, that oh, you
Mhm.
keep those things private, and you
Mhm.
can imagine growing up in that generation, what happened in your home stayed in your home, you know,
Right.
and so
Right.
it's
I heard that
amazing
a
how,
lot.
right, so you've heard
Mhm.
these sayings, probably they
Mhm.
were passed down. That's
Yeah.
literally what I grew up with, you know, and so for me, I look at there's a lot of good when I think about that generation of baby boomers. I for me personally, I'm gonna say what I appreciate about them and what I try to take from them. What I try to take from them is their values, some of their
Mhm.
values. You know, following the rules. Playing by the rules, working hard, building a life. Becoming a productive member of society. I appreciate that very very much. Um, and I also fall into their line of thinking when it comes to a certain extent, dealing with the opposite sex in some small ways. I've never been real big on a whole lot of personal displays of affection. I'm a freaky beast behind closed doors, but in public, I mean, I try to keep it. So for me,
PG.
yeah, I really do. So you know, that's kind of what I take from them. Anybody else before I move to the next group?
Well, that you say that as I was sitting here thinking, my grandmother actually falls into the baby boomer. She was born in 1949. And it wasn't until you said that one of those things that your mother says that it reminds me. I've told you some of the
Yeah.
things my
Right,
grandmother
right.
says.
Yeah.
Um, she is one of those that is very, very private. Now as far as her kids goes, they had she was more open as far as conversations regarding sex because it wasn't taught to her.
Okay.
They were still part of the generation as far as anything sexual related was if you kiss somebody you'll get pregnant. They didn't even tell them the
Wow.
act of sex causes
Wow.
pregnancy. That's how she ended up with children, and she'll tell you that too. So I'm not telling
Wow.
anything that she
She,
doesn't say.
she
Wow.
probably
Um,
Wow.
thought, well, as long as I
so,
don't kiss
but
him, I'm good.
she worked. She married. She married my grandfather. And um, he was a Rolling Stone to say the least. So but I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. Have spent a lot of time with her, and I can tell you. And my mom will say you are so much like you. You're a lot of the sayings, things you say. You're like your grandmother so much. She's like, you're like a little old black woman, Tasha. It makes no sense. You're 32. So
I can attest to that. Being your friend, I can attest to that. Tasha has kind of an old soul in a lot of ways, and her
Mhm.
views definitely hark back to a generation, way from before. So I definitely can attest to that. Anything else, ladies?
I was gonna say how you were talking about how that generation was responsible and they were hardworking, but that's the same generation of Woodstock. So there was a lot of drug use and partying, and so they kind of some managed both, but yeah, there was a lot of other things
We
going on
knew how to
too.
party. That's for sure. The
A
people
lot of
learned it.
I mean, absolutely. Okay, I'll tell a little short story on that. Growing up in Harlem, New York, that you say that, Darcel, the way our apartment was made, we had 2 living rooms.
Mhm.
And my mom, God, I'm going to. My mom is a Jehovah's Witness now. This is keeping it. I'm gonna keep it real. This is real talk. So she's given up a lot of those things, but back then my mom, they did it. You know what I'm saying? We had parties. What people call parties now doesn't even compare. Growing up, we grew up in a house where there were regular parties, and they were we had two living rooms, and the way our apartment was made, when you first come in, you get to the first living room. That was the older people. That was my mom's generation. Now me and my sister Sherry, we were told to go to bed, but you know how kids are. So especially when it gets packed, we
Right.
weren't even noticed. Keep in mind, the lights were dim. They were smoking and drinking, and whatever the drugs of choice was back then, they were doing it. We were not noticed. We was crawling on the floor. Then it get to the point where we just was roaming through because nobody was paying attention to us. And in that first living room, oh man, you got your BB King and Bobby Blue Bland playing, and them old people's doing them belly rubbing dances,
Oh
like
yeah.
a straight out of Fred Sanford, you know. And we had a long hallway, and you'd go all the way down, and you run smack dab into the second, living room, and that's where the younger generation were kind of partying in there. And I remember growing up in that time where the music was Isaac Hayes and Al Green. It was the whole Motown thing. And so, man, I saw so much freaky stuff going on from that generation. It's a wonder that imprinted on my brain. I was introduced to these things. So me and Sherry, this was this is pre-COVID, y'all. So back then we walking around picking up cigarette butts, smoking off of them, picking up drinks, drinking out of them,
Yeah.
you know. But to your point, Darcel, on the one hand, they went to work, they believed in paying bills and stuff, but when they
Mhm.
partied. They partied for real, for real. And these parties went on sometimes for 2 days.
Mhm.
Oh God.
They,
Yeah.
they, just because daybreak came, the party did not stop. So if you've ever seen some shows like a movie like Claudine or some of these episodes of Fred
Mhm.
Sanford, and they had rent parties and things back then, when they partied back then, they partied for real, for real. And growing up in that was it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I gotta say. Anyway, I had to tell that little story. Welcome to the party, Kennard. How you doing, my brother? We can't hear you. I
You
think
gotta
you're
unmute
about
yourself.
I'm
There you
getting a
go.
little feedback.
okay.
So let me go out and come back in.
Okay, all right. We're gonna move to the next generation, which just so happens to be my generation, Generation X. So this is from the years of 1965 to 1980. And the age group, just so you know, that's talking about people from about 40 to 55. As mentioned already, I just turned 53, so I'm making my way. You know, and so another name for this generation, they talked about Generation X. They called them the last key generation.
Mhm.
And in my
Mhm.
research,
That's
it
true.
talked about
Yeah.
that MTV generation,
Mhm.
of people. And some of the things that define that generation is it talked about having a focus on the work-life balance, you know, um, to be able to try to do both. But obviously, coming down from the baby boomers, this was the generation that thought, how can I have both? I still want to be responsible enough to have to go out and work hard, but then you can't make work your everything. Can't be a workaholic, So
Mhm.
you got to have some kind of balance. So in my generation, you start to see people start to kind of have some kind of balance towards it. That's why you think about that MTV era. This is that generation that was either raised by two parents, but both of the parents worked, or in single parent households. So it's also that generation was raised in a divorce household. And so I started thinking about how that impact us and the way we look at things of that nature. This is the generation that started to delay. This I'm gonna bring this interesting point. It talked about this generation. They started to delay marriage and childbearing and to focus on self. And
Mhm.
so a lot of people from this generation came from broken homes. It talked about
Mhm.
that. So just in describing that, And I started to take a look at myself, and it was a really, really funny look in the mirror to think that where I came from, and remember I told you guys just a moment ago, the baby boomers had big families, all these kids. Well, all of my brothers and sisters, no one family member has more than 3 children.
Hmm.
So you can really see exactly that transition where they went from, we grew up in this family where there was kids everywhere. And when you grow up sleeping in the bed with feet all in your face and shit, and you got to wear clothes from somebody else, I think it starts to affect you. Start thinking, I don't want to have that many kids. So it was that balance of, yeah, they still had families. My sisters and brothers got married early. I did as well. And you feel a sense of responsibility to start a family, but you're kind of torn. I look at myself. You're kind of torn that I don't only want to just have a family. I want to be successful, in the workplace as well. So before I take up all the talking points, what do you guys think about that generation and how they deal with things and with people?
I
Um,
think this,
oh, you can go ahead, D.
okay. I was just gonna say, I think this generation, they noticed how hard their parents struggled, and they did not want to be a part of that same struggle. So instead of getting, just kind of the minimum job, they wanted to go to college. And so when you go to college, you put off having kids, and then when you start working the job that you went to college for, you put off having kids. And then when you start to climb up the ladder, you put off having kids. So this was the first generation, and then you realize the expense that comes with having kids. So you say, well, maybe instead of having 10 kids, we're just going to have 1 or 2 kids. So I think this generation was just more aware of all the factors that go around with starting a family and career and things like that. And it was, even though you're trying to maintain the balance, it was a little bit harder for them to maintain that balance.
How do you think that need to have that balance, D, uh, going to college, smaller families, how do you think that affected their decisions in choosing a mate or just in being with somebody in a relationship?
Well, obviously you want to find somebody who's compatible, somebody who's financially stable. And so, you wouldn't want to find a man that's wanting to have 10 kids when your goal is maybe 1 or 2. That's not going to work. Or you don't want a man who, and some people think this way, this is not always true, but if you worked hard to go to college and get a master's, PhD, or whatever, you might not want a guy that doesn't have a degree. So, sometimes there just aren't men available for you, or women available for you. So it does affect the way you see the relationship. I mean, the things that you may be looking for are not there.
Okay. I'm gonna come back to that point about the education. Candace, I
Okay.
don't want you to lose your thought.
I feel like this. Looking at my mother because she's the beginning of this generation,
Okay.
1965, and here come my daughter. As soon as I start talking, so she my grandparents, they remained married. My mother was a PK, and so she was the wild child of the PK. She of the PK children. She had me at 17. So I
Okay.
feel like those Generation Z, I have a different outlook on them because of her and my auntie. They seem like they're about partying. The white ones were yuppies in the 80s. they,
Okay.
they
Okay.
were the ones that got to do a lot. Oh, this is nasty. They got to do they got to do a lot. And I just think of her, my mother, like when you meet her, she'll go and say her age is 18. She like 18 was her favorite year because that's when she could start drinking. And so
Wow. Wow. Wow.
yes, she was about self,
I
but
like your mom.
they seem like partiers. So I'm gonna mute myself. I'll be right back.
You all right? Kennard, jump in here, man. What do you think about this generation, this Generation X, which is my generation, and I've talked about some of the characteristics and traits. What do you think about how that generation relates to one another in terms of relationships?
Now, when you talk about Generation X, what year does that start? I mean,
We're
what,
talking 65 to 80.
okay,
1965 to 80. I'm Generation X.
okay. So as it turns out, I was actually born in 1979. So I'm at the tail end of the Generation X. Now,
Okay.
I think this is an interesting time period because as you catch the tail end of something, of course, you catch in the beginning of something else.
Correct.
And I think the transition leaves guys like myself who were raised by baby boomers for the most part, given all of those ideologies about what a relationship should be like or what a relationship looks like from the earlier portion of the baby boomers and who they were influenced by, and also looking at it to where their values are kind of mixed. They may tell you things like, well, you need to wait to have a relationship because if I would have waited to have children or waited to get married, I might have been a lot more further in life. So they will pump this into your brain that having a relationship or being married and having children is a hindrance to having a quality life. When it turned out, I think that's somewhat false because I didn't begin to be more responsible. I didn't begin to be more financially savvy until I actually had a family. Because when you all you have
Wow.
when all you have is yourself to be accountable for, you can drop the ball in certain places. But when you have
Mhm.
other people depending on you, and when you want to up your life to another level, you know you having a family is great. So we kind of came in that transition. The music started to change as well during that time.
Absolutely.
R&B started to slowly transition to from hey, can I get your phone number, to hey boo, I want to, it started the music, the media started to transition. And
Absolutely.
then the advent of rap started to get to the point where it was media logic to actually disrespect a woman or to call a woman out her name, or hey, all you want to do is have sex. And now that mentality starts to transition over to where you don't know whether you want to be in a serious relationship, be a pimp, be a husband, be a jackleg. So you're just in a confused at the tail end of the Generation X.
I love Kennard makes so many good points, you know.
Mhm.
But I want before, and I want to address a couple of them real quick. But I want to acknowledge a point that Rhonda made. Rhonda, thank you for posing this your thought. Give me, and I invite the audience, please send questions, send thoughts as you watch this. Rhonda said she finds it remarkable that our grandparents had 10 children. I'm using her word, yet managed to feed them all the way less than what we have. They were resourceful and only one income coming in mostly. Absolutely right,
That's true.
Rhonda. That generation, they were more resourceful, because as we get into this conversation, I'll talk about some reasons why. We grew up in that generation where you got government cheese. Sometimes you didn't get to
Mhm.
eat meat for dinner, Rhonda, and there was 11 of us in the house, not including my mom. And so, yeah, dinner sometimes was just plain rice. It was cornbread sometimes by itself. You slice that bad boy in the middle, put some butter in there. You walk around, you was full for the night. We didn't grow up with a father figure in the house, so we had to make do. Everybody had to play their part. You're absolutely right, Rhonda. And so my mom had to do things where, we were on welfare, and I'm talking about the old welfare, and she had to work under the table, cleaning houses, and we had to make ends meet. Christmas wasn't what it used to be. Rhonda, if you know anything about that government cheese, sweetheart, then people just don't know that government cheese. Ain't no cheese like that government cheese. So that's real talk. Kennard, to your point, I look at what you said about your age and how you came in there. You made a good point. I told my nephews to wait. I got married at 21. So you talked about how that generation were telling the ones behind them, hold off from having families. That is the advice that I gave my nephews. Now, I like the point you made that you said for you, you didn't become more responsible until you got a family. And I can appreciate that. But I also would
Mhm.
say, looking back on it, I don't think it was bad advice
Mhm.
because I'm going to use my own self as an example. Because I followed my brothers and sisters example of getting married earlier, because you grow up thinking that's what you have to do. I got married at 21. Well, guess what? I lost out on those years where I should have been out there sowing my oats. So once I did get divorced, I was 30 years old. So now I lived the next 10 years in my 30s like I was in my 20s because I actually felt cheated, you
Mhm.
know, out of what I should have been
Mhm.
doing. And so I don't think it's a mistake to tell those behind you, hey, wait, this is not all encompassing, but I think the message I wanted to get to my nephews in particular was get all of that shit out of your system first. You know what I'm saying? So don't jump out there and get married, start having kids. And we see this all the time where now you've got kids. Now, this is not your experience, but what about those people that jump out there, have kids, and now I think that's responsible for why you have multiple kids, in so many different households.
Right.
Because maybe had they waited, sold a little bit more, they oats, had a little bit more fun, and
Mhm.
waited till they were just a little bit more mature and ready and established. And
Right.
so that's something that that should have been passed along. Wait till you're a little bit more established, before you jump out there. So I just wanted to comment on that part.
And plus, too, during that time, let's just say
I'm coming to you, Tasha.
back to the 60s and all of
Your
that time.
voice is going out on me, Kennard.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, that time back in the 60s, 70s, 50s, society was set up to where it was kind of easy ushering for an 18 to 21-year old to own a home, to get married, things of that nature. But now society is set up to where
Very true.
you got to work, you got to
Mhm.
work a bit harder, you got to have a good credit score, you got to.
Yeah.
So now I do get, I don't, because when I made my statement, I didn't disagree with the advice of waiting and getting yourself established.
Hmm.
It's hard as hell trying to struggle during that time, like say between like 21, well, I'll say between 18 and like 26, you're like an emotional nightmare. Like you're emotionally weeds on a lot of levels. You ain't got no money.
Mhm.
You ain't got no, you think love conquers all and all that other bullshit when it really does. It's kind of hard to love somebody when you have an eviction notice on the front. You know,
The
Amen.
struggle life.
Correct.
Amen.
so
Amen, brother.
so either way, I think what has also transitioned is the social financial status of the United States, to where it's not easy to just say, hey, we're 18, we're going to move out and we're going to get married. It's a matter of fact, I stayed at home for about 2 years right out of college just to get my shit together.
I love it.
I
I
mean,
love it.
so it's not as easy to transition from that point to where you can just say, hey, I'm gonna get out here and I'm gonna have a family. Because you ain't, and plus another thing too, jobs want you to have experience. A lot of times, the higher paying jobs, the
Right.
jobs
We
don't.
gon' we gonna get into that. We gonna
Oh,
get into that.
well,
We gonna get into that.
I'll tell you what, I'll end my part right here because I don't want to, get too deep into what's
Right.
later on down the line. So I just flick it to next, Tasha.
Tasha, because
Okay.
we gonna get into that, how the job market has changed. Tasha, please, I'm sorry, please go ahead, sweetheart.
No, my dad, my mother, and I believe even my stepfather all fall into Generation X.
Mhm.
So it was a big shaping of my upbringing. But now my dad, with my grandmother, really having old school values, and with him marrying my stepmom, very old school. But I can agree that they did say to wait. There's no sense in getting in a hurry, no sense in trying to jump out there to have kids and everything. I think this is the generation where we really started to see a lot of single mothers. The
Yep.
sexual exploitation really broke free, I think, in Generation X, where it was no longer about jumping out there and getting married and starting a family. It was kind of like, let's just do it and let's just see what happens. Because this is also, this is what, like, the disco era and everything. So cocaine and
And Tasha,
everything coming
I was
in.
gonna say, and to add to your point, this was a little bit before HIV, so they were just
Correct.
having unprotected sex like
Correct.
it was nothing.
Mhm.
Correct.
Yep.
Absolutely correct. Because you're
Yep.
talking about my teenage years, and the most you worried about back in the teenage years, they called it the clap back then. As a
Mhm.
young person, you
For
might get the
my,
clap.
I know I don't know stuff. think mono
What
was
you say,
pretty
D?
high back then. Mono
D.
was pretty high then.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. That dirty woman's disease. So it wasn't
Nasty
nothing
one.
that was exactly, but it wasn't nothing that was going to kill you. So all of these are things that shaped us. I'm gonna also highlight some things from this generation that I found interesting. And when it talked about the media consumption, it says Generation X still reads newspapers and magazines, listens to the radio, and watches
Mhm.
TV. About
Yeah.
165 hours worth of TV a month.
Mhm.
However, they are also digitally savvy and spend roughly 7 hours a week on Facebook, the highest of any generational cohort. I found that really fascinating and true, and so true.
Right.
That is so interesting to me
Mhm.
because Facebook started with millennials. Like it was only for college students, so it's very interesting that
Right.
now Generation X, they're the most on Facebook. So that's interesting. I'll give my thoughts a little later, but I want to hear what else.
No, but no, that was Darcel. Did you have something on that?
I was just gonna say this is something that I tell girls getting married in your early, like late teens, like 18, 19, or early 20s is like leaving the party at 9 p.m. None of the cute guys are
Wow,
there yet. Nothing's
wow,
going on. It's just
wow.
the
Thank
start.
you.
You're missing
We gonna we
everything
gonna
that's about to happen.
we gonna get to your little funky
I
generation
was
here in
gonna
a
say
minute.
I think marriage should be after 30.
We're gonna get to y'all little generation coming up, just so you know.
I just wanted to add this with the Facebook though. I think we all know, like with millennials, we had MySpace and then it transitioned into Facebook. But once there became other
Right.
platforms, it kind of, and the Generation X learned how to work it. It
Yeah.
kind of turned off of the millennials and like, let me get the hell off of here now. Let me go find somewhere else to play. That's what it
Yeah.
is.
'Cause
And,
we're on Instagram, Snapchat, and YouTube now.
and do
So
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
even though I have an
Twitter.
Instagram account, I just don't like it as much as
I,
Facebook.
I about
You
like
know,
Me too.
a
I
guy
think
in my
oh,
age group, that whole thing, Snapchat, and it's all about pictures, and
yeah.
and TikTok, it scares the shit out of me.
Love
Oh,
Tasha
I
TikTok.
love
introduced me to
TikTok.
TikTok. Tasha introduced me to TikTok,
Love
but
TikTok.
that
I love
whole
TikTok too.
so we're gonna come to that in a second, because for me, it's very irritating that just when I see something I like, it's going to a damn new video
Yeah.
because it's only 30 seconds, and that just pisses me off to no end. But we're gonna get to that in a second, I promise you. And so it really defines me. Let's talk about banking habits for my generation. It
Mhm.
says since we're digitally savvy, Gen X would do some research and financial management online, but they still prefer to do transactions in person. They believe banking is a person to person business and demonstrates brand loyalty. I can't tell you how true that is. And I had to force myself away from physically walking in a bank. I was absolutely against ATM machines when they first came out. I didn't trust them. I needed to see a person, and even paying my bills, I needed to see a person. Having Tasha be 20 years younger than me, she's kind of helped force me into being more tech savvy. Like, I remember one day I was shopping. This was like maybe like 5 years ago. She said, "Well, Black, why the hell aren't you just ordering stuff online?" you know, it comes right to your door, because I was still caught up in the idea that you go into the store, you try the pants on, you look, and it seems that you guys like, but I had to come kicking and screaming into the generation of paying bills online, doing my banking online, because yeah, I'm from that place that I need to see your face. I want to look you in the eye to know you got my money in there.
Do you
like
trust the person
point
to
too.
count your money more than you do a machine? The machine's gonna get it right every time. The person
see,
might
see,
screw
but
it.
I
Oh,
didn't see it
yeah, I
that
don't
way.
know about that. For me, if
I didn't see
something,
it that way.
I still gotta see some. Like if something's wrong with my account, no, 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 I don't want to talk to you. I'll be into the branch. I'll come in there and talk to y'all about it. No,
Oh
no.
God. I'm
Also,
sorry. Go ahead, Kennard.
I think during that time, like say you and I in the same generation bracket, we felt like we weren't like we had to work hard for stuff. Things had to be harder. I don't
Okay.
know, glorified working long hours, glorified in things being. Now that I look back at it, you get paid, you go to the bank and you stand in a long line to cash your check. Like that shit is inconvenient. I used to look. I look. You look at my grandfather and my grandmother didn't pay many bills, but my grandfather would sit there with all these bills spread out on his damn desk, and then he's got to mail all of them off, and all of this other stuff. Now it's to the point where I love it. Now I wish he could have. He probably would have liked this too, being able to just say pay bills, doop, 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 and everything is paid in like 15 minutes.
Right.
You know, and then he's having to get his checkbook out and fill out the checkbook, put that shit in the envelope, and then find a stamp. And when you look at the time consumption of a lot of the stuff that we had to do back then, it's just it's just crazy how things are now. Now with the Facebook thing, I think Facebook is probably going to be my last stop because I can't keep up with Insta. Because now that's another thing, that even being a tail end of the Generation X,
Hmm.
I still have some of those old people mentalities that I was taught.
Okay. Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. And
Like,
I'm getting ready to come to your generation
be like, it's too loud,
next.
music's too loud, all this other stuff. I see where they're coming from now.
And so I got one last question before we leave Generation X, because this is my generation. I'm curious to hear this to ask you guys. What is it, the one thing that you would take from our generation to apply towards how you deal with each other?
Mm.
Mm.
I don't know. I guess I don't know. Resilience. My mother seems very resilient. Like a lot of times when people do stuff, she don't care. She would like just get over it. She's one of those people. Her and another woman, like you're not the first and you won't be the last. So just get over it. Like
Okay.
so, I like that type of. I like that type of idea because I think with my generation, the everybody wins thing is just it's too much. But
Okay.
I like the resilience of Generation X.
I got you. Anybody else?
I'll say, as far as the dating goes, like Generation X was still the kind of the era where men really courted you and they called you and you on the phone until you fell asleep and it was so cute, you know. And now,
Yeah.
you know, this new generation, I mean, it's like a text message. So, you know, that's the one thing, just how people
Yeah,
interact
that
with each other.
WYD.
Absolutely.
Oh,
WYD
at 3 a.m.
I
Darethel, we made actual phone calls and wrote
Right,
letters.
right,
And I
right,
was going to see if anybody kind of picked up on that.
right.
Tasha.
no, I thought we were going to discuss that a little later on.
Okay. Okay.
But 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 I do want to add this though. With the Generation X, this is really, and y'all don't like to admit it, this is where y'all started spoiling children. I don't want to raise you how I was raised because I didn't agree with that. That's really like where it started for to me.
the
Um,
entitlement of the millennials,
which,
basically.
which leads right into the millennials. All right, we get ready to come to your generation. I had to get to this one because this is the majority of my audience that falls into this category. And notice on the bottom of the screen what it labels y'all as.
Me, me,
AKA
The
me.
me.
me generation. I so enjoyed this. I so
You gonna
enjoyed
get
this.
a lot of hate mail after this.
Hey,
Yes.
I gotta tell you, this was so cool. This is the generation of years from 1980 to 2000. So
I really feel like it should be split because I feel like 80s babies are totally different from 90s
Preach.
babies.
I was gonna say that already. It should definitely
That's
be
not true.
split between the elder millennials and these zillennials. It should totally be a totally different generation because
okay,
we're different. We're different.
I'm gonna want y'all to tell me why as I get into some of the characteristics, because I'm not making this up as they define it. This is what they say, but
Well, can I say one reason why 80s babies, we still played outside? These 90s kids want
That's
electronics.
true.
I agree with that. But I want to see
Hmm.
where So, because I want y'all to tell me where that changed in. So, hang on to that. So, this is that age group from 24 to 39. And so, some of the things that made up this generation of the millennials, and when it says the me generation, these are the young tech savvy gurus. And this generation thrives on innovation. And they were raised by
Mhm.
parents who had that, to your point, Tasha, who weren't authoritarians,
Mhm.
who started introducing into
Yeah.
parenting, I'm more of your partner. And so this is the generation where we started seeing the
Mhm.
timeouts. Darcel, on our last show, we were talking about corporal punishment. This is the generation that started removing corporal punishment. No,
See,
we're gonna do
see,
something different.
I got whooped by my
Okay, hold
Generation X mother.
on.
So
Okay, that's what I'm saying. Hang on, we coming there. But I'm
Mhm.
just saying it. This is that generation where it started turning that we're gonna raise our kids a little different. I'm more of your partner, you know.
Mhm.
And so we started to see that happen. As far as dating and things, y'all is the generation that started that dating online through the websites and things of that nature. Um, and it talks about how y'all were married to technology. But here's
yeah,
the key to that. Although you're married to technology, it destroyed your interpersonal communication skills, which ultimately led to
Mhm.
rampant rise in depression. Anybody, that's a lot to take in.
Let's
Yeah.
Anybody.
just start
it,
there. That is the
Very
zillennials. That is
true.
not true elder millennials. Because I was not raised like that. Not
Okay.
when, not where you could play. We had a computer in the house, but it was only for schoolwork. And this is when you first started having to do stuff on the computer. But yes,
yeah,
we still had to play outside. It was not that whole you're all winners or anything in my household, and there was still old fashioned ass whoopings going on in there with whatever. You might get hit with a spoon, you might get that the electrical cord. My dad had a police belt that he would beat the hell out of us with if you got out of line. So it's that I definitely don't fall into that.
You're interested,
yeah.
but go ahead.
I agree with Tasha. Like there's two sets of millennials. I was the millennial that played outside.
Yep.
Now in my kindergarten class, we were introduced to the computer, so I did learn the computer. But it's also we're the generation where the chat room started, where you had to really watch what your child was doing. And I don't know if y'all saw this movie, Megan is Missing, but it's a crazy. It went
I
viral
haven't.
recently.
It's
What is it?
crazy. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
yes. Be sure to look it up, but make sure you watch it when you have a clear mind and and you're not as depressed. But we were we were the generation though. I feel that we were spoiled because my mother, being a young mother, those young mothers back in the 80s wanted their child to have the Jordans and just the best things and all of that. So
Mhm.
I'll say this. I feel like as a millennial, even though I'm put in that category, my views are more traditional because my mother didn't want me to repeat her cycle. So I
Okay.
don't know. I definitely think it depends on the person, but I do feel like the technology came with what we did. But I'll let somebody else go before I
Well,
go on the soap.
real quick, I want to acknowledge Rhonda. She talked about, she was listening to you, so she was saying, like you agreeing with both of you. It seems that she probably split off into a different level of the millennials because she said she had to go to the library, stay outside, and quit running in and out of that door, and she got plenty of butt whoopings. So Kennard talked about that earlier because it coming in on the tail end and at the beginning.
Mhm.
So it does seem like for
Right.
you ladies on here, for Rhonda, y'all still was kind of getting that generation, X part of it
I,
because I can say this. When I read that, it really defines that generation, but you're right, not maybe some of you so much. And talking
I
with
really feel
you had
like
butt whoopings.
I really feel like 76 to 1990 is its own generation.
Mhm.
Honestly, it
So again,
we
but according to this, that's what I'm.
yeah.
But that's why we're discussing this because if you feel like you fall into a little different category, But Kennard made a lot of good points because those generations crossed into each other. Because you're right, even if you go to the music,
Mm-hmm.
music from the 80s to the 90s, it was a completely different scene.
Mhm.
Completely
Yeah,
different,
you
Right.
got
completely
F
different
the
scene,
police and all that.
you know. So the
Mhm.
80s was the rap era and still in disco, you know. And so that's Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson ruled the 80s, absolutely ruled them, you know. And then you got the 90s, my favorite artist of all time. That's his
R.
son,
Kelly.
Kelly. That's it. The 90s belongs to R. Kelly. You know, Tasha shaking her head.
Man,
But it
you is not playing.
Ah,
but you can see how even the music changed because you had a different split. So again, I didn't make this up, but I do like the point they make about calling it the me generation, though, in a sense that when I look at that age group, when I look at that age group, it did for some of that age group that it was all about them, you know. And I think from a relationship aspect, I do think we lost something because it became about the individual, you know, and that my individual needs, I'm gonna put that above any relationships. And so I think that's where we saw that. And I'll talk about that in terms of the dating websites and things like that. But I didn't want you to lose your point. Darcel, you had a point?
I was just gonna say the '80s kind of going into the '90s. I mean, I think the kids that grew up in the '80s, you were on the tail end, but you still got the whoopings and the traditional values and things like that. But as they saw that the parents were willing to give more and they were going into the '90s, things did change. Because I'm a product of this era,
Right.
and you're split right in between. So I mean, I kind of grew up like, okay, we got disciplined very harshly, but we also got everything that we wanted. So it was kind of, so it was kind of, the best of the both worst worlds, or however you want to put it, or, whatever. But, I grew up in the era where, I'm not as traditional as Candace and Tasha. I mean, I don't spank my children and things like this because, you know, but some of the other values that were on the tail end of that I took with me. So
I,
Yeah.
I
I
understand what
love
they're
We,
saying.
we don't spank our kids either here, which is why you see them coming on camera.
it.
I spank my dogs, so the dogs get it in the house.
I love
So
this. Let me talk about your generation and how you view media consumption. It says 95% of you guys still watch TV, but Netflix edges out traditional cable as the preferred provider. Cord
Yes,
cutting
that's
in
true.
favor of streaming services is the popular choice. This generation is extremely comfortable with mobile devices, but 32% of you will still use a computer for purchases. They typically have multiple social media accounts.
Yeah,
True?
That's
I
yeah.
can agree. I only use my laptop for work, and now you're doing these shows, but other than that, I'm usually on my phone. Like if I can't do YouTube or something on my phone, I'm like this. Oh my god, I feel like I'm in the ice age because I can't do it on my phone.
I'm the exact opposite. I am
We
the
need to
exact
deal with
opposite.
your cell phones.
Candace, I'm the exact opposite. Tasha can tell you about this. I just bought a new phone here recently. Of number one, I wait till Christmas to get a new phone for free because I'm not going to pay for a new phone. I literally switched from Cricket, to Metro because you can walk in the store and get a free phone. So I'm paying for a new phone. But the other reason is because of what you just said. This is not that important to me.
Mhm.
If somebody pulled up my call records, it's a very short list. Honestly, Tasha, Sherry, Jay, Daracel, my mom. That's the list. That really is the list. I really don't talk on the phone all that much. I hate watching movies on the phone. Tasha's previous job, she watched everything on her phone, and I call her even now, like, what are you doing? She said, I'm watching a movie on my phone. Well, wait a minute.
See,
in the bed,
But
Yeah.
in the
why are
bed.
you
in
watching
Me
it?
too.
That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
and
Come
Lee, you
on,
know
go ahead.
somebody we worked with used to watch ESPN on his phone, and he'd be watching Skip that Skip guy because I hear him talking about Skip all the
Hey,
Right,
time.
right, Skip Bayless. But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I'm the exact opposite. I prefer to be on my laptop, my desktop. When I'm preparing for these shows, I do everything on my desktop. I do my
see,
research. I like searching. I need this big screen. I want to be able to see everything. So, Kidar, go ahead.
see, that goes back to portions of our generation to where it's got to be a little bit more difficult because that's what we were accustomed. That's what we were accustomed to.
I don't find it difficult though.
I dare anybody from the millennial era to come into my grandmother's house and try to steal her heavy ass TV.
Wow,
You know what I mean?
wow.
We had
I,
those, we
What?
had those
They just trying to sell it
TVs.
because what they
We
gonna do
had the
with a TV?
VCRs. We had
good point.
all of that stuff. Everything in our era was difficult technologically. So the reason why we don't embrace it so much is because it doesn't make sense to us. It doesn't make sense to be able to watch a freaking movie on a cell phone. You know what I'm saying? Like
I don't get it.
that's unheard of. Uh,
That's a punishment to me that I gotta watch something on a
yeah.
small
Then,
screen.
then
Ah,
to be
I gotta
able
wait
to
till I get home.
just the other
That's a
day, now
convenience.
I'm able to
it,
watch the Auburn games on
Right.
my cell. Things are so convenient to where even though it would be easier for us, we just can't embrace difference. We can't embrace change, even though it's more convenient. But we
sir,
just rather do it the hard way.
Rhonda,
sir, you
Rhonda,
cannot be watching games on his phone.
Rhonda is with me. Rhonda say all I need to do in my phone is to talk. Bravo, Rhonda. Bravo. I don't know what generation you
She's
fall in,
telling the truth.
but bravo. Oh, you know Rhonda?
Lord,
She
D, you
Rhonda's,
know Rhonda?
yeah, that's my best friend. She,
Okay,
yes.
okay. Go ahead.
oh
Bravo,
no,
Rhonda.
She
I have.
falls into, I think she's like 79, 80. So yeah, but she's telling the truth. She does not know how to work her phone at all.
Bravo,
Wow.
Rhonda. Bravo.
No, as a millennial, and I don't even consider myself a millennial. I just consider myself, I guess, in between. I still need my phone for everything. So I really get mad when apps are not compatible because, I don't know if you notice this, Lee, but YouTube, you can't edit it on your phone. And that pisses me off that I have to go to a computer, have to pull up this big old laptop that I'm sitting in front of to get YouTube to work. I feel like it's about, I'll say this: you want to make, as millennials, we want everything efficient and quick. So that
Question. So
that's
question.
the main
Inconvenience.
thing.
Yeah,
Question on this
inconvenience.
before I leave the technology aspect. And thank you, Miss Rhonda, for sharing your age. Beautiful. My
Uh,
mom, 83, beautiful. God bless you, making it to the stage and on Facebook with us. I love it. Thank you for
Yes.
this. I love it. If I could only get my mother to embrace this, she fusses me out about this. But okay. Before I leave the technology aspect, so question for you, for you ladies. What effect do you think it has had on your ability to interact in relationships because you're so heavily dependent upon technology?
My I would say for me, it's affected me because I don't use it how people use it. I'm still very much I want to meet someone in person. I don't do the online dating and those dating apps. I don't trust it. I'm sorry. I think everyone is a serial killer. So I gotta meet you in person.
What is
Okay. I
it?
gotta like feel you
Plenty of
out first.
fish. That was the
So
one. Plenty of
I
fish.
love plenty of fish. That was my hunting ground, plenty of fish. But okay.
Mine was black people meat.
I did them all. Local space, I did them all. So okay.
it definitely affected me it more negatively than positively because I also don't use my phone for as much as it can be used for. I don't really engage in social media, so that definitely doesn't apply to me so much. As like you told me you wanted me to be more active on social media, and that's a lot for me. But I don't even know how to post on Facebook.
I can
That's
tell
me.
Tasha, you don't even have a profile picture. And I was like, I added
Yeah,
her as a friend,
I
and I
did
didn't
her.
even see her.
Yeah. So,
Mm-mm. I don't even want to put a picture on there, but that's just for privacy reasons because I'm very private. So
so D and Candace, y'all are both married. Tell us, for you guys, what's the impact been in terms of how you use technology, the reliance on technology on your marriages? If it,
Well,
if it
and I'll tell this truth. I met my husband, even though he used to work at my school. When he worked at my school, I didn't. He did security. He had access to a lot of chicks. I didn't even talk to him, but because he was friends with my son's father, I saw his profile and remembered that he worked at my school. So I found him on Facebook and I added him as a friend. And I was like, if he likes two of my photos, or if he messages me, that's I'm gonna go in. And he's the first guy that I ever initiated something by adding him as a friend. I call that initiating it because I'm used to men chasing me. So if I'm adding you, that means I'm initiating something.
Okay, okay, okay. You're happy to say that.
And
You
so
you
he,
Jason B. Okay.
he liked two of my pictures, and so I messaged him and I said, "Hey, you look familiar," and it started from there. So we reconnected through Facebook.
Okay. Okay. Darcel, what's been the impact of technology and on your marriage?
I will say sometimes it can affect your marriage and relationship negatively because when we go on dates and things like that, it's a no phone zone. Phones have to be turned off. Can you hear me? You look like you can't hear me.
It's a little mechanical, but I can hear you.
Okay. Um, so we go there, whatever, phones have to be turned off because sometimes if you go to any restaurant, on dates, people are having this, and nobody's talking to each other. Nobody's looking at each other. Everybody's just on their phone. So we've done the zero phone, on dates and things like that. So that's how we kind of manage it, and we in our house have no time. 6 o'clock, all the devices have to go off, the kids and ours or
Oh,
whatever.
wow.
So that's just how we manage it. Yeah. Something we do board games, we watch movies together, we do.
Oh
Oh,
man, we lost
Oh
her
man, I was
right, right,
into it
right
too.
when she was really getting into some good portions of it, and we're getting her back. But I love that number one, she recognizes. D, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay,
Hmm.
and you actually sound more clearer. You got cut off
Yeah.
right when you were on the good part where you talked about you have a cutoff time for your phone and you and your family watch movies. I'll let you finish.
I was just saying, so I noticed that every night we would be sitting in the living room. Nobody would be engaging, nobody be talking. Everybody just looking at tablets, phones, or whatever. So I just 6 o'clock, the phone, no electronics time. If we were together, we could, but that's the time we really take to talk about our day. Anything that anybody needs, anything that anybody wants. If you want to play a board game, if you want just family time. So in our house, 6 o'clock.
We're losing a lot of it, but I can make out what you're saying. So
mhm.
it's a little, and I want
Yeah.
to add that before I go to the next thing about your generation. But I'm proud to say that, believe it or not, whether you know this or not, your
Hmm.
method of turning off those devices, devoting to family time, guess what generation that you can attribute that to? My generation.
Generation Z.
My generation.
Generation X.
Oh,
My
get out.
generation. And that's because it was in learned from the previous generation. The focus should be on family. So I love that you make that a habit for your family. I think that's smart. Rhonda says it's a great idea. I think that's a great idea. And I wish more people followed that example. To You should have a cutoff time. I like the fact that you don't deny them from having it, but there should be a time where the family talks about their day, things of that nature. And that's the generation I grew up in. Imagine 11 people all sitting around a table, because in my generation, we all actually ate together. You know, it wasn't where you took your food into your room and ate separately. So literally around that table, believe it or not, is where you heard about who was picking on you at school and what your grades were and what was happening. And so that practice you're doing, I'm gonna claim that. I'm gonna claim that.
I
Okay.
just wanted to add this
Go
last,
ahead.
and I meant to say it earlier when you were asking about something that we would take from Generation X from your generation.
Right.
I would take the privacy and living in the moment because we don't do that anymore. It's not real unless it's posted. It's not real unless everyone else sees it. And we just want everyone to see it and to get affirmed by people who don't even matter. And I
I want I want you to do me a favor, Tasha. When we get to as we get to the conclusion and we're talking about our takeaways, I want you to bring that point back up because I want
okay,
to drive that home with something that I think is important for the audience to hear. So bring that point back up for me, please.
okay.
Okay. There's another point on your generation I want to bring up. We got time. It talks about you guys banking habits. It says millennials have less brand loyalty than any previous generation. They prefer to shop product and features first and have little patience for inefficient or poor service. Because of this, millennials place their trust in brands with superior product histories such as Apple and Google. They seek digital
Mhm.
tools to help manage their debt and see their banks as transactional as opposed to relational. True? Not
Mhm.
true.
I
That's
can
true.
somewhat agree with that. I'm usually
Mhm.
on Google reading reviews for something before I actually give them my business.
Right.
Um, so as for banking, I thought I was going to mention something about us not saving. So I feel like we save. I save my money, but I know it's been said that we don't save money. But as for what you said, Lee, I don't know if I can agree with that because we I'll say this: we do look at reviews, but it's to build that relationship with that company. We have to trust what we're getting into. I'll say
Okay.
that because our parents are the ones that told us to watch out for things like this. So
Okay. Okay. So I want to clear one thing up. What I'm reading from, that's not my thoughts. These are articles that I
I
pulled up.
know.
Okay, so let me say that. But you bring up a good point. You said you guys are considered not saving. I do see in your generation where they don't save.
Yeah.
Now you may be different, and as I've gotten to know you, you and Kennard seem to be more grounded and stable. You're about family. But let me ask a question. I'm looking at Ken when I say this. Your counterparts out there, they're not saving. They're
No.
not planning for the future. Darcel is agreeing with me. That you guys, you got to know that that's different when to hear you say that you're saving, and
Right.
that's a big
But
part of the problem. They're
I think
not
that
saving.
I think that comes with responsibility though. Like me and Kennard chose to be married because I feel like right now it's a war against marriage. Like marriage is like the devil.
I agree,
So
but I'm saying you guys are different
yeah.
because your generation. Let me say this: not you, but your generation enters into marriage with the idea that if it doesn't work out, oh well, I'll
Yep.
just marry
Mhm.
somebody
The
else.
divorce. Yeah.
Already planning the
Yeah.
divorce at the
And
at the
so,
at the
right,
proposal.
you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
And
I
Kennard brought up earlier another point about owning homes. He was so right about that. 17 years old, I had a 3-bedroom house. I live in an apartment right now. Darcel met me when I lived in an actual house, and she
Mhm.
can attest to this. My nephew says that house should shrink away and go to hell, considering the things that we did in that house. you know, because it was a house, it really wasn't a home. I wasn't married, I was single. I had rooms that I really didn't go into. I had a beautiful
Mhm.
living room with white furniture, but it was the party room, right, Darcel? When
Yeah.
I had
It definitely
parties, the
was.
furniture got moved out, and that's where we kicked it. I had a
Yeah.
spare bedroom with a video camera pointing at the bed because that was my freak chamber, you know. Um, I had another
Mhm.
bedroom that I turned into an office, and then my own personal bedroom. I hardly ever slept there even though I had an
Mhm.
attached bathroom, because any of the dirt that I did, them nasty, filthy, no goods, they got done right there in the den. And so they never made it to the bedroom most of the time. So
Wow. Lee, moving from the freaky stuff. I'll
okay,
say
right.
this. I'll say this. We are the generation of discovering things. I feel that way. And so there's like apps, like say if you want to learn about stocks and own stocks, there's Robinhood. And like I have some stocks through Robinhood. So
Mhm.
it just depends. I feel like the millennials are very innovative and we are always adapting to what's happening then. I'll say that.
But so let me ask you, the other two panelists, what she's saying, she's mentioned all these great apps. How many in y'all generation are taking advantage of that?
I think a lot of them probably are. I know I don't. And I don't really trust Google reviews because of Generation Z and their cancel culture. And I don't trust because people will purposely go out to sabotage because it's so just so evil. And because you have a bad experience, you just want to ruin that whole business. And you can't do that for me. I have to see it for myself. But again, I got trust issues. So that's why I don't, if it's somebody that I don't really know that I can't give like a good word of mouth, then I have to go for myself to figure it out.
Can I add this too? I don't know if it's an Atlanta thing or our generation, but it's all about residual income as well. With having several, not only do you have your job in our generation, but you have other businesses outside of your job. Have you noticed that as well, Lee or Black?
Yeah.
Like the whole multi-level marketing boom and the businesses and all that. Our generation, I feel like, is about making that money. That's all we're concerned about.
So
So we
here's where
have
I'm gonna give you credit.
different
So here's where I'm gonna give you credit. I think over the last 5 years, one of the things I admire about your generation is that one point right there. Is that one point right there? Your generation, because you have skills in being tech savvy. I've seen in the last 5 years what I do admire about them is the hustle mentality, to where I think I do see where that generation is trying to have multiple streams of income. Now, having said that,
Right.
you know, there's some pitfalls to that. Again, I think interpersonal relationships have suffered greatly because of that. I do think it is the me generation. You know, male, female doesn't matter. It's really all about yourselves or whatnot. And I want to bring back a point, even to that point, in within that hustle mentality. As quickly as you guys make it, I don't agree with the savings part of it per se, because it talked about that not being and having no loyalty to brands, and you prefer to shop. You that generation also, in terms of that name brand thing, that
yeah.
they're caught up in, they have to buy a certain kind of this, a certain kind of that, and
And I
that's
feel
where
like
that same disposable income. It's one thing to make it, so you hustle and you go out and get it, but just as quickly as it comes, that's also the generation that's making it rain,
yeah, in the strip
throwing
clubs.
that
And I
money
feel
out
like
the
this
other.
I'm gonna say this. I feel like we make it, but we don't trust what our because technically the millennial parents are the boomers. We are not loyal to these companies like how our parents were, and so a lot of times we feel like you have to prove to me why I need to be loyal to you. And when you look at it, I don't this I guess this wasn't at AIU when I worked there, but at a previous school that I worked at, they talked about 2020. That was the year that millennials would be the majority in the workforce, and we
Right,
would take over the place of the
right,
boomers.
right.
And so most millennials have had several jobs. It's not about basically work experience. It's more about your knowledge and your school experience. And so it's just interesting to me the shift that has happened as millennials. I feel like we are innovative. That is the part of the millennial part that I'm claiming. We're innovative and we're not trusting what society says we should trust. We're not traditional. We know that we've seen, and think about it, in our lifetime we've seen the Trump era. We've seen so much happen, Corona, all of that. So we're taking all that in and still trying to navigate in that. And so I feel like
I
we're
don't disagree with that. And in this show, I'm
yeah.
not going to focus on the negatives, but I don't think all of that necessarily I don't think it's made your generation better. To be honest, I think it's
Yeah,
hurt you more than it's,
I don't think
let
we're
me finish.
better.
Let me finish.
Yeah.
I think it's hurt you guys more than it's helped. But on Saturdays when I do these shows, I don't want to get into the serious part of it because I wanted to kind of keep it light. But I agree with everything you said in terms of your innovation. That's one thing that I admire. I just think though what has suffered at the hands of that though is how you deal with people, how it has affected you guys when it comes to relationships. So the good part is the hustle, that I agree with that. But I'm not but I won't use this to focus on the
Yeah.
negative aspects of it at all. Let me get
I
Daracel,
couldn't
let me get Daracel in here.
yeah.
Daracel, come on.
Sorry, my connection went out for a second. I wanted to
Okay.
say, like, this is the era of YOLO too. You only live once, so they're not thinking about saving. They're not thinking about kids. They're not thinking about future. They're thinking about whatever I want to do in this moment. I'm just gonna have fun. So, there's kind of a selfish mentality. So yeah, it is the
That's
me,
the
me,
point I was
me.
making. That's the
Tasha
point I was
and
making.
Nikita are
Can I
the
say this?
Yeah, no,
As
please.
a
yeah.
as a millennial, I'm not thinking one generation is better than the other. I just feel like it's a sign of the times.
No,
Things
no.
change.
When I say better, I'm not comparing the two. I'm saying I don't think it's made your generation better as
Yeah,
a whole,
I,
as a group,
Right.
I
because of
feel
that's
like
the point I'm making. That when you live with that mentality of you only live once, you only go around once, so why save? I think in
Right.
your generation there is a direness
Right.
in terms of I'm not trying to get to be 50 or 60. Your generation is the
mhm.
one that generation. Do you know in your generation there's young men out there that can't conceive making it to 50 years old.
Yep.
Wow, that is so crazy to me.
But
I'll say this
that's the reality.
with some people in my generation though, we think about generational wealth. So we're thinking about building for to
Right.
pass on things
We're
for our
not talking about that. This
yeah,
is not all across the board. I keep saying that.
yeah.
So I'm not talking about you individually. I'm talking about as a generation. Your generation is the one that was the point that Darryl brought up that I was making. That with that, you only live once and it's all about me. That generation is the one that's not looking
Mhm.
towards the future. You're right.
Mhm.
Because you've experienced the Trump and the this and the that, they've given up. Do you know how difficult it's been to even get that generation to vote because they don't give a shit? In many
Are you
cases, it's just
you
about
re-
them.
you think that though with let's take Georgia because I'm in
Oh,
Georgia just like
no,
you.
it's real. Okay, okay. I'm gonna say this one thing, but we're not gonna get on the political thing. But I'm gonna
Yeah.
say this one thing since you bring up Georgia. It took the mobilization of Stacey Abrams an extraordinary amount to make this happen, and that's
HBCU graduate too.
and that's because it's not normal. That's my point. So it
Hmm.
took an extraordinary effort for them to mobilize the young people enough in that generation to care enough to turn this state blue. But we're gonna leave it right there because we're not gonna do political on
No,
it.
I agree
We're
with
gonna
you,
leave
Lee.
it right
I
there.
agree with you, Lee.
So that's the only point I'm making. But again, I'm not saying all encompassing and nothing even bad about I'm just saying those are the things that shaped you guys. One last point. One last point I want to bring up on your generation before we go to the last generation. It talked about the rampant depression. You know, I agree with that point, Tasha, where you say that it doesn't affect you, and I agree. You personally, but I've never seen a generation that is so mentally weak in so many ways as well. Yours is a generation that
Gen Z
Mhm.
still,
is weaker than
oh,
we are mentally.
we coming. But so that's the generation that all of a sudden I started seeing people talking about killing themselves,
Hmm.
and the whole I saw that generation. I don't know, Darcel, you're a medical person. All this medication that this generation is on, the ADH and the Adderall and the this and the that, because that's yours is a generation that started needing that to cope. My generation is such where I'm gonna make a joke about this. I grew up in a time where shit, if you broke your leg, you take some Robitussin and you go lay down. Comedian joked about that, but the point behind that is we didn't go to the hospital for every little thing. We didn't take medicine for every little thing. We didn't complain as much. But then this generation behind us, my God, they take off work because they every little thing,
They
little
they need
hair
a
fell out.
mental health break.
They need mental health breaks and stuff like that. And I'm the old guy at work that I come in, I do my job. You leave your personal stuff out in that parking lot.
Right.
But yours is the generation that bring all that shit into the office that, oh my God, I'm feeling so stressed. And because, this. So,
And man, whew,
go
man,
ahead, Kennard. Go
man,
ahead, Kennard.
making me have some flashback. There's one particular young lady on the schedule. When I see her name on the schedule and I'm at this store,
Uh huh.
I already just go ahead and visualize the dramatic
Hmm.
outcome either way. Either it's going to be a dramatic text talking about, I've been throwing up all day and
Oh God.
left me and I don't know what kind of mental state I'm going to be in. So I'm like, okay, cool. And when I saw that the manager actually removed her off of certain portions, I was like, cool, because I can't deal with that shit. Because being a I don't even want to say it's because of being a Generation X slash grandfather fathered into the millennial stage.
Right.
It's just that that kind of stuff wasn't acknowledged. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't to where if you coming in without, they were like, man, you just batshit crazy. You need to go in the corner and get your shit together. But now the healthcare industry is actually making a living off of these people.
Yes. Yes.
I just want to I just want
But
to add to that real quick. I will say this, when you were talking about earlier Gen X and the work life balance, I disagree with that because
Mhm.
I really feel like it started with millennials and it really started within the last probably 10 to 12 years is really
Okay.
when you started hearing that phrase a lot in regards to the workplace.
I, you know what, Tasha? I
Good point.
absolutely agree because when I first joined the workforce, no one gave a shit about work-life balance.
Good point.
It was like,
You're right. You're right.
you work 90 hours, you get
You're
your,
right.
and if you complain, you're fired. I remember one time when I was working at Tuskegee University as a security guard. I worked so much that I actually got suspended, and I was glad because I was like, "Shit, I needed the
You
break."
need you need the rest.
So I was because when I
You
got
guys are right. You
yeah
guys are right.
yeah when
Tasha, you're right.
from security, I was like,
Mhm.
man, this is a great break. It came, matter of fact, it came at a good time too, because my brother just happened to come home from, I don't know where the hell he was stationed at the time, but he just happened to come home from Columbus, and man, it was like a tour. Man, we went to this little club in Montgomery one night. Then we at the strip club in Columbus on Wednesday. Then we capped it off with the Alabama A&M versus Alabama State basketball game that is always played Valentine's Day weekend. And hell, I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, so we did that. So it was perfect timing, but at the same time, that's another reason why even I've just now, I would say in the last maybe 5 years, really understand the concept of work-life balance. I thought that look, you need to go to work and you need to work until your fucking knees fall off. And you know what I'm saying? But now I'm to
I agree.
where now
I agree.
I
I
do.
agree.
Oh, you know what? It was so bad when I was at Enterprise, I didn't take no vacation. Man, I
I
had
agree.
when I got fired from there,
It's on
I had so much vacation time, and I
it's only in the last 3 years that I even learned how to really take a vacation because
Mhm.
I grew up to feel guilty to be on vacation.
yeah, you got
So so
work.
so you guys are right. I,
My
I
wife,
want to get I want
I
to
don't,
get to the last group. I want to get to this last group.
yeah,
So I want to do them justice. Where the Generation Z, I want to do this, do them at least justice. So we hardly ever have a Generation Z come on camera, which that explains a lot as well, as we get into this, because this is that age group. It says here from 5 to 24 because they're counting Generation Z from 1996 going forward. So we know they could be a little bit older. But okay, so let's talk about this generation. So this is the generation, like I said, that was born from 1996 to 2015. And they do have all these other nicknames: I generation, post millennials,
mhm.
homeland generation. And I'm going to read something here where it talks about them. It says, no, I'm going to do my points first. My research called them the unknown generation. And it says this generation arrived with a tablet and a smartphone under their arm. They grew
Mhm.
up with this stuff. This is the generation. They've never used a rotary phone. Most of them don't know what a landline phone even is. They have no concept what a payphone is. So they you want to talk about tech savvy? They grew up 3 years old. That's in their hands.
Right.
This group is marked by the internet, and the internet is in their DNA, and it affects everything from their education to how they socialize. And it says that although they are masters of technology, this mastery also has resulted in a gross neglect of interpersonal relationships because their lifestyle is influenced by YouTubers. We're going to talk about this.
Mm.
You know, they're the generation that are used to getting everything they want, but they want it immediately. And although they multitask, they have short attention spans and they are independent and demanding and they have difficulty finding jobs. What do you guys think?
I'll tell you.
Well, can I say this, Lee? You
Please.
know, with these students that we deal with it across the education, in talking to them, it's one word answers like, "Hi, what made you request information?" School. I need to go to school. Okay, what do you like about school? I don't know.
Preach,
like,
preach, Candace, preach. Let me
like,
ask you a question since we're in the same industry.
yeah.
People think that we don't do anything physical, so we're not physically tired. How mentally tired are you?
It's mentally draining when you have to, because our profession is about painting the picture of how to leading you to your success. So if you're not giving me anything to lead you to your success, I'm basically painting the whole goddamn picture for you and basically selling you like, okay, you're gonna do this program. This is what I think is good for you based off of your one word answers. And if it work, oh well. If it don't, oh well. So it's like it's
I think
draining.
that's why we drink, don't we? Because when we get off work every day,
Yeah, and I'm finished with mine
you
already.
know, I'm not. I'm drinking water tonight. I'm not even drinking tonight. But Candace, Tasha knows that when Friday gets there, forget Friday. There are days when I'm so mentally burned out and I'm cursing all while I'm doing my job because I'm dealing with this is an absolute F and F numbskull, like you
Yeah,
said, because they're one word answers. And when it says they're influenced by YouTubers, when you ask this generation, well, so what's your plan? They think a real job is being an influencer. That's what they
yeah.
want to be.
They call it a content creator.
I've heard all kinds of, so
And and
going out of traditional roles, and so it's very difficult to try to mold, like you said, mold them and motivate them into wanting to get an education because they don't really see the value in it.
exactly. And I'll say, Lee, I want to thank you for teaching me this because before I met you, I thought men students were the same just as female students, but you were the one that told me that men have a hard time with talking to other men. And so now I manage over 11 campuses and I have to teach my male admissions officers how to deal with other male students because what they're missing out on is there are a lot of men that want to go to college, but they do not like talking to other
It's
men.
not like I mean, there's an instant wall that goes up the moment they hear a male voice because all of a sudden it's like you challenging them.
Right.
So whenever I'm enrolling a male student, I have to play mind games and become their friend.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, so anyway, I'm gonna
And
let you
Kennard, I was gonna say
go
Kennard
ahead,
can
go
tell
ahead.
you that because I told Kennard about that. I said I had one coworker tell me about this, and it was back in 2015, 2016, whenever I was there at
Right,
that
right.
company. Yes.
Kennard,
So
I'll let you jump in here.
All right. So especially when you're dealing with like a male millennial, there's a lot of sensitivity there. There's a lot of not necessarily daddy issues, but they don't do a lot of men stuff. They don't cut grass. They don't take trash out. They don't do a lot of stuff that we were groomed to do as men. So they would just as the female counterparts don't really have to do nothing. They ain't have to do nothing either. They don't have no chores. They don't, so really as it is, they come out into the world, but they're still men though. They still have the men they still have the men
I love the way he's saying this.
physiologically. So that's where the ego comes in. So when they're in the workspace, you have to channel that because now you got an emotional, lazy, physiologically challenged. And now when you come to the forefront trying to help them out, if you come at them the wrong way, oh, so you trying to sun me? You trying to, and I'm like, Okay, so I come from an era to where if you don't give a damn, we don't give a. That's my era.
Right. Right.
Where manhood and bringing shit to the front door was the deal. But now you got to kind of curtail around these
Yep.
people. So,
Yep.
so the way you do it now is, for one, when they do act out, you can't immediately acknowledge it because they want that attention. For some reason they want to respond to something. They
Absolutely.
they want to
Absolutely.
about something. So when they do stupid shit, you have to be like, oh, okay, let the stupid shit kind of blaze its trail, and then we'll follow it back up with, okay, well, next time this is the way I would approach it. And
Absolutely.
you have a young manager in leadership, because for one, they don't want you coming telling them what to do, but they want you to bail their motherfucking asses out when they do something stupid.
All good points.
You know?
And I like that you didn't leave out women,
Oh no.
because this generation, Generation Z of women, they're also not groomed to do things. They don't cook, they don't clean,
Right.
And so to this point, if you look on Facebook, that's the medium I know best, but even on Instagram and Snapchat, this is the generation that spends their entire day taking pictures,
Oh man.
poses, and pictures. And here's where I give them credit. Oh my God, they got their little looks together. They're the most fashionable of all the groups. They got the poses just right, the lighting is just right. I see the little girls; they all got the stand where they've
Yeah.
been taught to stand pigeon-toed with their hips kind of out, so they can halfway look at their butt. It's a beautiful thing to see that they've got this mastered. And the guys, like you said, they're still men, but they got the manly thing down. We're not going to delve into negativity too much with them, but it was just so true to read this about this generation and how for them, what they've grown up watching though. So what I took away from this for me is that this is the generation, again, it's the result of all of those other things that we talk about this in our private lives. This is also the generation where it was a comedian said it before, there's no big mamas in their lives. Mind you, their mothers are not too much older than them, and in many cases they grew up not even being raised by their own moms. They're being raised by aunties and things like that. There definitely isn't any male influence in their lives, so they learn how to be men cannot off videos.
Let me tell you.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I don't want you to forget your thought.
Yeah, because I will. My
Go ahead.
You would not believe, in the industry that I'm in, you would not believe the amount of young grandmothers, the amount of young mothers, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. We're not condemning them. It is what it is.
It is what it is. But the information and the knowledge and the wisdom. Let's just say, for example, my grandmother. Let's see, if she was born in 21, my grandfather born in 21. When I was born, they were 59. So they had a wealth of experience. As a matter of fact, when I talked to my father about this, he was like, "Man, I met Papa Stewart, and he was old in." You know what I'm saying?
Right.
They were old guys.
Right.
And that's another benefit that you and I had. We had old head. We had this old knowledge. As a matter of fact, my grandmother, for example, I bought this girl to the house. Actually, she wasn't even supposed to meet them. My grandmother just happened to be outside because I had an apartment right by the house, and my grandmother just happened to be outside being nosy. So I felt compelled to introduce this young lady to my grandmother because she was outside. It wouldn't look right.
Right.
And my grandmother said, when I reconvened with my grandmother later on that afternoon, my grandmother said, that girl is flighty. She was able to pick apart that young lady.
I know what you mean.
You know what I'm saying? And it just so happens that I think on a large scale, more often than not, you just don't have that knowledge.
It's not there.
Experience. A 40-year-old grandmother does not have the same experience as a 9-year-old grandmother.
Correct.
And at
Correct.
the same time, what a lot of folks don't take into account is the residual effects long term of that. You got a 42-year-old grandmother. Now you got a 18-year-old, 18-year-old mother. Then now you're gonna have I've seen it. Matter of fact, it's going on right now. Then you have another 16-year-old grandma. Now you got a 38-year-old grandmother, and
38. Think about that.
the residual
A
effect,
38-year-old grandmother.
yeah, the residual effects long term is really detrimental to any community, because
Absolutely.
most communities you have the high level patriarch, which is the grandfather that's about 70 years old. You got the grandmother that's about 65. You got a mother that's about 50. Then you have the next level that's 30. And then the next level. Where's the level? There's so many levels of knowledge that are being taken
That
away.
are missing, absolutely missing, and it's detrimental. Tasha, I want to give you a thought. We're going to go to the conclusion here in a little bit. You hadn't got a chance to speak on this as far as the
No,
Generation Z.
no, I think it's been, pretty well thoroughly covered. I just call them the keyboard warriors. That's what I think of them. They're more just keyboard warriors. And I know we really haven't been able to talk so much about the how it pertains, each generation pertains to dating and relationships. But some things I could say, just to stay away from the negatives of the positives of how they view relationships. It's actually quite surprising that a lot of them are actually they want to get away from the hookup culture. A lot of them do want to get away from that, and that they are looking for someone in particular.
I'm going to add to that on a positive note, because again, I don't want it to sound like we're just coming down all on the
Mhm.
negatives. We're talking about factually what it is,
Right.
But the positive that I take from that generation is you're right. They're not having as much sex as my generation had,
As
believe it or not.
mine.
Believe it or not. When I talk to these young people, for whatever, for a variety of reasons, I should say, they're not as sex starved as certainly as my generation is. They
Mhm.
do care more about their own brand, technology, whatever their personal interests are. And so the irony is that they're actually holding off from having sex a little bit later. Now
Mhm.
they're sucking dick early, but they don't
Oh
consider
yeah.
that sex, you know. I mean, giving head, but in terms of actual sex, and then even when you see them as girlfriends and boyfriends, in my time, oh man, you screwed every day, multiple times a day. Their generation, they're content if they have sex with each other and a week could go by. It's just not as important to them in that sense. And
Mhm.
so, and like you said, Tasha, they are genuinely seeking somebody that they could connect to. And I
Mhm.
see it on their pages. So there is a reason why they're taking all these pictures and they're posting these things. It's crazy because I think what Kennard laid out so well, there's such a loss of old school wisdom that they're seeking it in each other to find somebody that just understand them, because there's such a different generation than we are, and they fall in so many different categories. We only had like a few categories in my generation. You had the jock, the nerd, the smart guy,
Mhm.
but these guys, they all across the spectrum in terms of what their interests are, what they like to do, and they're just looking for somebody to understand them. And I admire that in them, that they're using their medium, technology. They're using what they have in the best possible way to find that one person. And back to the TikTok. So they're innovative, like you said, Candace, in the sense that I watch them how they do a split screen and sing songs with people that they will never physically meet, but they're connected. It could be somebody in another country, because they're very good at finding somebody that has that common interest, and then they express themselves better than other generations to me. They're not afraid to go all out and express whatever that is, because they're not seeking a traditional job. So I do admire that about that generation. you know okay, So we're gonna close out by, like I said, we kind of touched on a little bit, but I just wanted to kind of close out with that last part. And Tasha, I want you to bring that point up again about what we admire about these different generations and how it impacts relationships. I want you to bring that point up again.
So for me, I took I did some research on it and I took a look at each generation. And we just discussed with Generation Z, like you said, that they are looking, a lot of them are trying to look for that one special person and not so much focusing on the sex part of it. Now they are very visual. That is, men and women, they are all very visual. But as far as the boomers, what I would take away from it as it pertains in relationships, boomers, how they met people by word of mouth, in person, through friends, things like that. They were not afraid of labels. They learned the art of rejection, and they also learned the art of breakups by stating their specific intentions. That's one thing that I can take away from that.
Very good point.
And as far as Generation X, where that was still somewhat traditional, that's when the tradition really started to break there. But you still, in that generation, it was really about the intimacy and the romance between partners, not so much looking for stability, but really like the intimacy. And coming to millennials, and I'll do us last, coming from millennials, this is where you saw the breakdown completely of the gender roles, of traditional gender roles. That's where that the getting married older, not having kids, even making that decision. But more importantly, this is when you really saw an introduction into polyamory, really bringing that to the forefront, entering into those open relationships, and also the equality of marriage for everyone. So that's what, for me in my research, that's what I saw from each group.
Love it. Love it. Candace, what's your takeaways from this conversation?
My takeaways, I mean, I feel I agree with what everybody else has said. I think every generation added something positive to the changing times. Now we're in a pandemic, and now it's up to Generation Z to reevaluate things and move us forward, because we all our generations, including millennials, we're getting old now. I'm close to 40. So it's up to it's up to Generation Z to figure out what we can do. I feel like we've been taught to reevaluate things in this current pandemic. And so they're going to have to decide what's important, because it's up to them. But those are my takeaways.
I love it. And so I thought I was going to say this great, eloquent thing about what I took away. I cannot beat what you said, Tasha.
Oh.
I thought you said it in a way that I'm going to take what you said. That's going to be representative of this conversation. I can't say it any more eloquent than you put. You literally summed up all of the different groups in such a way that I can't say it any better than that. And so from where I sit, that you were able to encapsulate it in such a succinct way, that for me was what was great about the conversation. I'm going to take that snippet that you said, and I'm going to use that as the representative of what this whole conversation has been about. You said it beautifully. Beautifully. I only regret that we don't have no more time to go into more details on that aspect of it. You know, we got kind of carried away into reminiscing about these generations. Whenever I'm planning these topics, a lot of times I don't have an idea of how much time we're going to be able to get into it and what points. And people say, well, you know, I have agenda. No, I take notes. I do a little bit of research, but I don't have a robotic script that I follow. I like for the conversation to go where it needs to go. And so it just led us to being able to talk about all those things that we saw personally. So we may have to revisit this, you know, in a different way. But I enjoyed the conversation, you know, as always, more than I thought I would. I really, really did, you know. So thank you guys for being a part of it. Thank Miss Rhonda. I know you had to go. Thank you so much for joining in. For anybody viewing, thank you for joining in, of course, as well. And we're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep building members one subscription at a time. As I always say, if you're watching this or if you go back to watch this, I do ask that you like, comment, and share. You know, I'm gonna use my last couple of minutes to say this to anybody viewing this live or going to view it. We're the only people that sometimes make it hard on ourselves to be supportive to one another. So anybody listening to this and watching this that sees this, Tuesday was my birthday. I want to personally thank each and everybody for sending out a birthday wish to me. Those same people, I ask you to do me a favor. If you have not subscribed to my channel, do so. Even if you're not going to watch it on a regular basis, the subscription itself is important to me. It says that you give a damn enough about what we're talking about to hopefully support us to keep it going. And even if you're not listening to it at the moment, maybe there's something that a topic will come across that'll be important to you. So the time it takes for you to send me that message, say happy birthday, it doesn't take much more than that to click on YouTube and hit subscribe, believe it or not. It really, really doesn't. If you have the link, please take the time. I know we're busy. I know we got other things going on, but I do want your support. I thank you for tuning in. And so if we can tune in each and every day for the minutia of what's going on and all kinds of other shit about Trump and this and that, something that we're trying to do positive. Candace has a show. I have a show. So you got an educated woman and an educated man trying to put out some content where we're trying to better our community in some way. All we ask is for your support. We're not asking for your money. Just hit subscribe. Just like us enough to say, hey, I like what you're doing. And I'm going to tell somebody else. And so for all those people who wish me happy birthday, please turn around and make sure you subscribe to my channel. Please tell at least one other person, hey, they're doing something special here, you know? And so if we can like a video when somebody pulls out their wee or whatnot, or fall down, or some bald-headed chick or whatever the silly shit going on, like what we're doing as well. Let balance it out. In 2021, let's be committed to try to do something positive for not just for ourselves. This is bigger than us, for everybody. So I'm asking you guys watching this, please subscribe to my channel, subscribe to Candace's channel. You can find me on YouTube. The name of the show is Real Talk for Real Men. Candace has a show called Candy Shop. Very easy to find, folks. Please, I ask for you to support us. And so that's how I want to end the show. But I thank you for joining in each and every time we do this. We appreciate it more than you will ever know. So I'm going to say good night on that.
Good night.
All right.